You are a dedicated learner, right? Otherwise, you would not be watching a series of lessons like this one. You will be watching these kind of YouTube videos that promise you to learn Spanish by listening to an audio while you sleep. And I'm pretty sure that aside from this video course with us, you are doing also other things to improve your Spanish skills. Hola, soy Alejandro. Bienvenidos a Keys Spanish. And in today's lesson, we're going to talk about language learning activities. This is part of our goal of being able to create our own study plan and introduce yourself to another language student at the end of Unit 1 of this course. If you haven't watched the previous lessons, make sure to do that. You have a link to the playlist in the description of the video. And you see how it relates to our final projects, because to create a study plan, you need to define the language learning activities of that plan. And when you are talking to another student in a language school, you will share also what things you do to learn Spanish. Let's start the lesson with a question. Además de un intercambio, ¿qué podemos hacer para aprender un idioma? ¿Qué significa intercambio? You need to know because in a previous lesson we talked about intercambios. It is an exchange, which was what John and Francisco were trying to do, is to get an exchange going between English and Spanish to practice. ¿Qué más podemos hacer? What else? What more can we do to learn a language? ¿Qué otras actividades? So I want you to think about it first. I want you to try to write down as many of the language activities you can think of in Spanish that you know to improve our language skills. Okay, so do that. Let's make sure you participate because you need to be ready for the audio you are going to hear now. We're going to do a listening comprehension activity where we're going to listen to Luis talk about what he and his family do to learn English in his case. Okay, and we're going to listen to this audio twice. The first time, I just want you to write down as many words or vocabulary related to language learning that you can hear. Okay, nothing else. You don't need to understand everything. No, just write down the words that you hear related to language learning.
Oye Luis, muchos en tu familia aprendéis inglés, ¿verdad?
Sí, ahora muchos estudiamos inglés, porque es muy importante hablarlo.
Claro, ¿y tú cómo lo aprendes?
Bueno, yo escucho bastante la radio y también estudio gramática.
¿Estudias gramática? Para mí la gramática es muy difícil.
Sí, pero es importante. Mi mujer, en cambio, no estudia mucha gramática. Ella prefiere aprender vocabulario y lee mucho en inglés.
Ah, leer es muy bueno para aprender vocabulario.
Sí, y normalmente por las noches nosotros vemos series de Netflix.
Fenomenal. ¿Y tus hermanos también estudian inglés, no?
Sí, mis hermanos hablan bien inglés. Ellos hacen clases de conversación con un profesor.
Ah, vaya, ¿y vosotros no hacéis clases?
No, mi mujer y yo no. Nosotros estudiamos por nuestra cuenta.
Vale. Oye, pues mucha suerte con el idioma.
Muchas gracias, Jorge.
You just heard Luis talk about what he and his family do to learn English and how many words, how much vocabulary could you get out of the audio related to language learning activities. Don't worry if you don't understand most of what you hear. The conversation is fast. It could be difficult. There is no transcript or subtitles. We just needed to get out some words related to language learning. Let's take a look at them. We heard something about radio, series on Netflix, classes, and we heard some verbs like escuchar, ver, leer, hacer. So now we're going to give it a second listen to the audio, and you need to complete the following sentences, both for yo, Luis, because we are going to do it from the perspective of Luis. You need to conjugate the verbs accordingly. So if it's I, Luis, I, whatever, to the radio. And then mi mujer, my wife, she does whatever she does mucho. And mis hermanos, as my siblings, they do whatever they do classes. Okay? So we're going to listen to the audio one more time, and I need you to complete with the verbs that you see on the right, on the left, the sentences on the right.
Oye Luis, muchos en tu familia aprendéis inglés, ¿verdad?
Sí, ahora muchos estudiamos inglés porque es muy importante hablarlo.
Claro, ¿y tú cómo lo aprendes?
Bueno, yo escucho bastante la radio y también estudio gramática.
¿Estudias gramática? Para mí la gramática es muy difícil.
Sí, pero es importante. Mi mujer, en cambio, no estudia mucha gramática. Ella prefiere aprender vocabulario y lee mucho en inglés.
Ah, leer es muy bueno para aprender vocabulario.
Sí, y normalmente por las noches nosotros vemos series de Netflix.
Fenomenal. ¿Y tus hermanos también estudian inglés, no?
Sí, mis hermanos hablan bien inglés. Ellos hacen clases de conversación con un profesor.
Ah, vaya, ¿y vosotros no hacéis clases?
No, mi mujer y yo no. Nosotros estudiamos por nuestra cuenta.
Vale. Oye, pues mucha suerte con el idioma.
Muchas gracias, Jorge.
Let's now take a look at the answers. So first we have Luis. Luis says that yo escucho la radio. El verbo es escuchar, and we conjugate it in the first person, escucho. If you don't know how to conjugate verbs in the present tense, it's because you have not watched our previous lesson on the topic. So make sure to do that. Otherwise, this will be tricky. Now, mi mujer, what does she do? And how do we conjugate the verb accordingly? Well, she reads, ella lee libros. Lee libros y estudia vocabulario. She studies a lot of vocabulary. What do Luis and his wife do together? Vemos, we watch, vemos series en Netflix. And lastly, what about his siblings? They hacen clases de conversación. If you want to have access to this audio with a transcript so you can listen again at your own pace and see exactly what you are hearing, remember that you have for this course the lesson notes of every video we publish, including the slides, relevant vocabulary, and here in this case, the audio, right, with an interactive player that you can follow along with. If you want to access them, you will find the link in the description. These lesson notes are, of course, as well as these video lessons, completely free. And if you are enjoying the video so far, please give it a like. It's also free. It's gratis, right? And it really helps. So now let's continue. In the audio, we heard some vocabulary regarding language learning. Now let's take a closer look at some of these words and others. We first can hablar con nativos. Hablar is to speak with native speakers, con nativos. It's one way of practicing with an intercambio, for example, un exchange. También podemos escuchar podcast, escuchar la radio. We can listen to podcasts, listen to the radio. As Luis Wives does, we can leer libros o leer revistas, to read books o magazines. Podemos ver series, ver vídeos en YouTube, como este, like this one. O ver películas, to watch series, videos, movies. We can study grammar or pronunciation. Podemos estudiar gramática, estudiar pronunciación. We can also use the verb instead of estudiar, practicar. Practicar la pronunciación, practicar gramática, which is one of the cognates. Remember also our lesson on cognates, if you haven't watched that. So practice, practicar. And hacer clases de conversación, like Luis' siblings, they do conversation lessons, hacer clases de conversación, hacer clases con un profesor. Now let's practice. This is an interactive learning experience, so I want you to answer. I want you to answer out loud, not just watch passively. Remember one of the tenets of Key Spanish, no seas vago. No seas vago and participate. So let's practice translating these sentences. You need to know first the vocabulary for language learning, but also the conjugations, okay? By using I in this case. So how do you say, ¿cómo se dice? ¿Cómo se dice I listen to the radio en español? Pause the video if you need to think about it, and I'm going to give you an answer in a couple of seconds, okay? So es, yo escucho la radio. Escucho la radio. What about we watch videos on YouTube? Now we need to conjugate in the first person plural. We watch. Yeah, vemos. Vemos videos en YouTube. Verb ver, to watch. You can also use mirar, right? But ver works. One more. She studies grammar. Would be estudia gramática. Estudia gramática. Also, keep in mind, as we mentioned in the lesson on the present tense, that we normally do not use the subject pronoun. So you could say ella estudia gramática, but that's not necessary. Just estudia gramática, it's enough. And the last one, they read books. How is that? We leen libros. Leen libros. And to take that interactivity to the next level, why don't you tell me in the comments, ¿qué actividades haces tú para aprender español? Maybe you can give me your top 3 activities you enjoy doing. I'm sure number 1 is watching Key Spanish videos on YouTube. But what are the other 2? Tell me more. Tell me more activities that you enjoy doing. Maybe you do it with someone else. But share in the comments, participate, practice while you're learning, and tell me some of the things that are part of your Spanish learning routine. And if there are not many language learning activities that you are doing, that's not good. And then you need our Spanish Beginner Kit. In this completely free set of resources for beginners just starting out with the language, we have both tools and recommendations regarding ways of learning vocabulary with cognates and flashcards, just opportunities to get input with all the channels and books, as well as grammar resources, guides, recommended book, and ways to practice too, where forums where you can write and get corrected from native speakers, the language exchange app we already mentioned, and even a study template, as well as other useful tools for your learning. So make sure to download that to get access to those tools that will set you on the right path to a solid foundation in Spanish. It's, again, completely free. And that's it for today's lesson. If you are enjoying these lessons for beginners, please subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the future ones that we are publishing every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And in the next one, we are going to create our own study plan. So stay tuned for that. Soy Alejandro de Key Spanish y nos vemos en clase.